Hi everyone, Michelle Ferreri here, Member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha, and thank you for joining me for this edition of People Before Politics. Pretty excited again to be bringing this. I really enjoy this. It's one of my favorite things to do, and the reason I started it, if you've missed any of the other episodes, was to really find out about who the people are underneath the politics. We live in this world of social media where people love to throw daggers and love to just expect that politicians or elected officials are not real people. But everybody's a real person. Everybody brings their life experience to the table. It shaped them for what they fight for. It shaped them for why they decided to run. And I think when we know their story, it humanizes it, makes us more connected, and makes us be able to have the discussions we need to have to move forward instead of you're either with me or you're against me. And that doesn't propel democracy at all. So today, one of the women that I admire greatly, and fittingly, it is International Women's Day today, so it'd be great to have this fine woman. I don't like saying strong woman because that actually annoys me, because then it means that you're not a strong. It's just a bit of a pet peeve of mine. I have very strong beliefs about International Women's Day, which we'll leave for, well, we might get into it in this, we'll see. But Rachael Thomas, many people may remember you as Rachel Harder. You got married and switched your name, which we'll have to talk about that as well, because maybe I may do that, I may not do that. Rachel Thomas, you are the Member of Parliament for Lethbridge.
You got it.
Just Lethbridge.
Just
Like
Lethbridge.
that makes it so easy.
So
Some of these
easy.
MPs come on and they've got 17 names. So and Shadow Minister for Heritage.
Yes.
So you've been a really big inspiration to me since I started, because you have a very powerful voice of the people. And I really connect. Like, there's just some people, like, everybody has a different style, everybody has a different voice. Rachel's voice to me is very, I really connect deeply with it. And what we want to talk about today, like, I've seen all of your accomplishments, there's a lot of them. But your life, like how you got here. So when I was looking at your bio, which is super impressive, by the way, things I didn't know about you is that you were, before entering public life, Rachael earned a strong reputation for building community and empowering others. Working as a youth sociologist and leadership consultant, her work took her across Canada to engage with business and not-for-profit leaders, universities, colleges, and young world changers. You graduated with great distinction from the University of Lethbridge, holds a Bachelor of Education and a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology, Political Science, and Psychology, named one of Lethbridge's top 40 under 40. That's pretty impressive. Congratulations. But what about your home life? Like, I want to know about you as a child. Like, when did you get involved in politics? What sparked it? I mean, you're from Alberta, so I feel like everybody from Alberta loves politics, but...
Yeah. That's an interesting observation. Interestingly enough, many people in Alberta definitely are interested in politics. My family actually wasn't one of those households. So I actually grew up in a household where I was the middle of 5 kids. My parents were hardworking, blue-collared individuals. My dad was a tradesman. My mom's passion was equestrian, so she did horseback riding and offered lessons and training. My dad was a tradesman. And so... as 5 kids raised in a hardworking home, I think we were taught to think innovatively, to be creative, to go outside the lines a bit. And so that was something that I just always grew up with. And I think the other thing that I grew up with was just this overall understanding that the world was mine to positively impact, that I could make a difference, that my voice was powerful, and that my hands and feet could do tremendous good for the world. And so I think growing up in that environment, volunteerism was super important. My parents modeled that for us, and certainly we spent many weekends volunteering at the soup kitchen in Calgary, or having young people out to our property, which was in the country. They'd come for bonfires and sometimes stay the night. And it was just an opportunity for these inner city youth who wouldn't otherwise have that chance to come and enjoy, kind of what the rural environment, I guess, might have to offer them. And so it was really fun. And I think I saw the difference that could be made with a few simple actions and investment in community.
It's wild, right? When we go back and I do these interviews with everyone, And now as a parent, I know you don't have kids, or if you're going to choose to have kids, that's another discussion. We don't ask people that anymore. I had that discussion the other day. I'm like, somebody said that to me. They're like, why do we do that? I'm like, listen, when I got married, it was like, when are you getting married? When are you having kids? When are you having your next one? Then you get pregnant for your third one. They're like, why are you still having kids? Like, it's just, there's just no pleasing people. But it's amazing what our parents' impact has on us, right? Like everything you just said there was like, you watched and you modeled. But yet we're seeing like a significant decline in young people volunteering. Like, so you see these kind of service organizations dying off. Like, why, like, what do you think propelled you then that isn't propelling young people today?
Interesting. I might be the last generation, or a part of the last generation, that grew up without a cell phone and constant access to the internet. Like,
you're tapping into my brain. That's exactly what I believe too.
I was raised in the country. I was raised, in the 80s and the 90s, and internet looked like dial-up. In other words, taking up the phone line in order to go, on your computer and be able to search online. MS-DOS was our friend. Like, these are things that people have no concept of anymore. And so I think, perhaps being raised in that type of environment, yes, we had access to the world. We still had the internet, but we also weren't always with a device in our hand. And so I think maybe that created an environment where creativity was allowed to thrive to a greater extent. And there wasn't nearly the degree of pressure to keep up with societal expectations as there perhaps are today. And so I think, that was definitely part of it. And there was just a greater emphasis placed on investment in people and making the world great rather than making your own name great. And so I think, volunteerism was just something that we enjoyed doing. We found pleasure or delight in it, making the world of someone else better.
I have this idea, it's a social experiment I'd love to do, where we remove all sources of media, all cell phones. You have communication, but you have to use a telephone to call people. And you have to go to the community center once a week, bring food and have a potluck and meet with all the people in your community who have different experiences, different opinions, everything. And we do it for 6 weeks. What would happen?
I think that's super cool.
What would happen, right? Like, because I think you've hit a very important nail on the head, and that's actually a really great segue to what is sitting behind you and the work that you have done on C11, because I personally struggle with this because I see what cell phone social media has done. I think it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of good. You can reach a lot more people. You can connect in positive ways, but it is absolutely reshaping our kids' brains. So when do we intervene, right? Or do we intervene as a government on what kids are watching, consuming, and taking in? Because as a parent, it's a major concern.
Yeah. And you're raising a really good point, and I think lots of parents have this concern: is what are their kids accessing online, and what opportunity do parents have to perhaps curate that material or steer their kids in the right direction. And of course, with increased media exposure, what we've also observed is also, an increase in mental health concerns. So there are big questions being asked by parents and society at large in terms of, opportunity to engage online and all of the things that transpire there. I think there's good questions being asked around privacy. There's good questions being asked around access. There's good questions being asked around, data ownership. There's good questions being asked around parental controls and what children should or should not have access to. There's good questions around, online bullying and the impacts of that. Those are good questions. And the truth is, I wish those were the questions that were being debated in Parliament right now when it comes to online use. Sadly, that conversation is off the table, not taking place. Instead, the conversation that's taking place with regards to online use is actually whether or not the government should control what Canadians at large have access to. And that's where Bill C-11 comes in. And so ultimately what the government is wanting to do with that bill is curate material online and then put it in front of the eyeballs of Canadians based on what the government wants us to be able to see or hear, which is far too reaching. Experts have called it a grotesque overreach of government.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's terrifying because as somebody who worked in the media, but also just somebody, you become what you consume. If I control what you see and read, I am changing how you think and behave.
Absolutely.
Like that is not a government. If you want to live in a communist country, it's fine.
And you raise a good point. I'll just, add to that. In responding to this bill, there have been actually legal and subject matter experts who have said that Bill C-11, when implemented, will actually push us into the realm of being like China or North Korea or Russia in terms of how the internet is controlled by government. And I think that's a really scary spot to enter into when the government has control over the content that we're able to watch, over the content we're able to listen to, and over the content that we're able to post online. That's not the country that we've built or that we desire as Canadians.
I think it comes back to, because I think the reason I asked you the question before I asked you that, because there is a problem. Like there is a problem with the information and kids and parents not knowing. Like, so if you were a parent, like I'm 43, I'll be 44 this year. So I'm like right in the cusp, right? Like I'm what they call like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I had a cell phone, I didn't have a cell phone, right? There was social media after I went through my teenage years. Thank the Lord. Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like, so, but there's all these parents who don't even understand it. The child is left completely unattended. And then so I think there's this argument that's being thrown, and you answered it well. It's like, well, don't we want to help regulate to ensure that it's safer for people? And I think that's, sometimes people don't understand that's not what Bill C-11 is it?
No, not at all. So exactly. So what the minister has said this bill is about is protecting Canadian culture and making sure that Canadian artists are supported. That's what he has said this bill is about.
And so that sounds nice.
It does sound nice, sure. I mean, we have a culture in Canada that is worth being proud of. We carry values that are worth being espoused. We have artists, homegrown content creators right here in our own country who are doing phenomenal work and able to reach a global audience. Those things should be celebrated, absolutely, no doubt about it. But again, Bill C-11, though the minister says it will do that, doesn't actually. In fact, what Bill C-11 does is it actually, it puts the government in a place where they will determine which, digital first creators or content creators, YouTubers, if you will, which ones get to succeed and which ones don't. In other words, the government will be looking at all content online and rating it based on how Canadian it is, again, in the name of protecting Canadian culture.
Yep.
So they'll look at these videos that are being posted and they'll rate it based on its level of Canadianness, which is some arbitrary, antiquated definition that no one really understands, including the government itself. And so then once they give it a rating, it'll either get bumped up or bumped down on the screen. So if the government really likes it, they say, yes, this is awesome Canadian content, it'll get bumped up. It'll be the first item that you get to see in front of your eyeballs. But if the government's like, no, we don't really like that content, it's not quite Canadian enough, it'll get bumped down and actually could really, be made undiscoverable altogether.
I think there's a key thing I would leave people with is even Margaret Atwood. Like, this is where I come out and I'm like, I can assure you, I don't think Margaret Atwood has a conservative membership. This goes outside of party lines. I guess what I would ask you, Rachael, because you have this great ability to do this. If I'm watching at home and I am so frustrated with politicians and elected officials. I'm kind of politically engaged, but I'm kind of the normal Canadian. And this side says, listen, we're really trying to protect Canadian culture. Well, that sounds great. And then the other side says, but that's not what they mean.
Right.
And so what happens, like I see this, now I'm on the inside, and it's a totally different experience on the inside than it was on the outside.
Totally.
And I see it every single day of saying one thing, but doing another thing. And I guess what I as a conservative, we're so pragmatic, and sometimes to a fault, where we're like, well, no. But I guess my question is, for these people at home, it's so frustrating to have trust when, but they're just trying to protect, they're just trying to make childcare, $10 a day daycare, like that's my file. And it's like, but the way it's written, it's not going to help everyone. But if you don't sit down and read bills, which most people don't.
Yeah, totally.
How are we supposed to say to the general public, listen, you can't believe what you're saying? And that is so disheartening for people to not, like, there's no trust anymore. There's none.
Mm-hmm. And I think you're tapping on a really good issue here, or tapping into a really good issue, and that is, of course, trust. Mm-hmm. And I think, one of the ways that government can elicit more trust is actually by getting out of the way. Like, the more government intervenes, the more government curates content, the more government, forces things upon Canadians, the more skeptical Canadians become. I think if we want to elicit trust, we have to say what we're going to do and do what we're going to say. Well, it's simple.
Like, that's so simple. And you're like, but there's all these agendas.
Right. And so I think with, so take Bill C-11, so for the minister to say, this is about, supporting Canadian artists and making sure that culture is protected. Well, when you have people like Margaret Atwood coming out and saying, no, it doesn't, and you have YouTubers coming out saying, no, it doesn't, when you have, petitions signed by hundreds of thousands of Canadians at this point saying, no, that's not what this does, then I think you kind of have to sit up and listen and go, wait a minute, maybe there's something more here than what the government is touting. And so I think that's where we as the official opposition come in, where we have an opportunity to present the other side and to say, actually, let me pull back the curtain for you and show you the details of this bill and what it will truly do to Canadians. And in this case, we know that the government has put a bill in place, it's in its final stages in the House of Commons right now, that will actually give them, as the government, the power to direct the CRTC to force certain content in front of our eyeballs and to take away other content that it doesn't want us to see. We know that.
As a optimist, you really expect that people will do the right thing. And this, pulling back the curtain, it's left so many Canadians going, but why are they doing that? Mm-hmm. What are you doing? And people don't want to believe, like, and so I'm like, maybe it's unintended consequences. Maybe the intention is good. Maybe there's a lot more maliciousness in there than we want to give credit to. But the average, well, they wouldn't do that. Like that doesn't, and you have this disbelief,
right,
that people would want to abuse power. Yeah. But they do.
Yeah. And again, I think this is where it comes down to trust.
Yes.
And I think that's where it's incumbent upon all of us as elected officials, regardless of party stripe, to tell the truth. And I think by that, what I mean is actually a high level of accountability is required. And that is to say, we don't just tell the truth in what we say, but we also tell the truth in terms of we're careful not to withhold certain information. Right? You can tell a little bit of the truth. That's not good enough. Tell the whole truth. Let Canadians weigh the information and make a decision accordingly. And that's our job. As politicians, as elected officials, it is our job to put all the truth out on the table.
And let people
and let them decide.
Yeah.
But when we hold certain key points back, we're actually not telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We're actually manipulating Canadians by keeping some information secretive. And that's the concern that I have in politics today. It's certainly something that I'm wanting to be increasingly aware of in my own life and my practice as a member of parliament. And I think we as the opposition are trying to do our best on this as well. And we would call the government to do the same.
But Jack Nicholson says you can't handle the truth. Okay, so Rachel, tell me more about what you think shaped your integrity, right? Like, because like that's what but I feel like you were really like you speak for the people, right? I do feel like you really try to elevate a common voice. Like, what do you think happened for like? How was your high school life? What did you get involved in? What were your hobbies?
Yeah, okay. So I think it's interesting. Upon reflection, I think the realization that I've had is I've always had this interest in community building. I think that's kind of the banner that I would kind of put over my life if I could. I've always had an interest in, building my community and like giving leadership. And so I can remember when I was super young, I wanted all of the kids in my area to be a part of like a kids club. And so I literally went door to door and knocked on them and like invited everybody to be a part of this kids club. And we would just do like fun activities once a week. That was the deal. And I don't know where I got this from, but I had this idea that I needed a board of directors.
I love this.
Yeah, totally. So there was like a governance structure. And so we like set up this board of governors or, board. And we came up with ideas in terms of like different activities that we could do for the kids in the area. And then we would do it. Like we would just plan it and invite everybody and it would happen. And there was just something in me that wanted to be super inclusive and make sure that people were engaged and that there was an opportunity to get to know one another and to do fun stuff. And so I think that same heart has continued, to take me through life, whether it was the kids, club that I started, at the age of 6 or 7, and then up through my junior high and high school years where I was super invested, not only in local volunteer opportunities, but also started exploring the world of international development and humanitarian aid. And so had the opportunity to do multiple international trips and raise a lot of dollars around that as well. And that was something I was super passionate about and wanting to make a difference in. And then I think, once I got into university, I chose studies that would continue to take me in that direction of being able to benefit humanity. And then also was involved in numerous other humanitarian projects, international endeavors, and able to, hopefully make the world a better place. Eventually, that, resulted in me putting my name on a ballot, which I don't think was an idea that I conceptualized really until I found myself in the moment and had, a myriad of people encourage me to consider it. And I thought to myself, you know what? I love, 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 love giving to other countries and seeing a meaningful difference made, especially in developing nations where people are poverty stricken. A lot of those same problems are right here in my own country. And I'm really proud of being Canadian. And I want to be proud of all parts in my country. And I have an opportunity to step into a world that isn't always fun, that is often very hard, and often feels like perhaps we're banging our head against a wall in terms of the speed at which we are able to progress or make change. But nevertheless, I do believe that this job is super important. And I believe that my constituents have placed a great deal of trust in me to be their voice and to be their hands within this place, and to pursue those values and those things that hold the greatest meaning to them. And so ultimately, that's my job. My job is to be here and to be advocating on behalf of the constituents of Lethbridge and on behalf of what I believe will serve my country to the best extent possible, not only today, but going long into the future.
And now everyone at home knows why I love you so much. That was very inspirational. That was great. And what I hear, because everything comes back to me as a mom first, right? That's how my brain is wired. And what I just heard, and I've heard it throughout countless interviews. If you're at home and you're a teacher or you're a caregiver, you're a coach, you're a grandparent, who that child is at a very young age, there is a spark and an interest, and they have shown it to you. It takes seeing it and igniting it. And everything you were when you were 6 years old, knocking on those doors, is who you are today. That spirit, that heart of who you are was there. It was nurtured, it was taken care of. But a lot of people go on a journey, and I go back to my own self. I love to write. I love to creatively write and tell stories. That's really what I do today. But so you kind of get pulled away from it because you go on Life and you go down this and you got to try all these things.
Yeah.
But the power of the people around you investing in kids and to come back to Bill C-11, the benefits of the internet, of being able to elevate a gift in a very noisy world,
Yes.
is so exciting. So to be able to say, I can, juggle, I can play the piano, and to be able to put that on a forum that reaches an international audience where you may be weird or different in your own little school, but on an international stage, you are incredible.
Yeah.
That is the power of the internet and the good that it should be. And it should never be the government that decides whether or not your ability to play the piano or bake a cake or build some kind of amazing welding tool should be shared with the world, and how it's shared with the world. So that was really great. Like, that was you. This is the power of colleagues, because this job is up and down and up and down. And I always say, when one of us is down, the other one's like, no, it's okay, we got to keep going, because it's a huge responsibility. This position to try to bring balance. Star Wars had this figured out ages ago. There's always the fight, right? There's always the resistance. There's always the freedom fighters. There's always the people that are fighting against sort of that brick wall that's saying, no, we'll tell you when, we'll tell you how, we'll tell you where. And the sort of autonomous free thinkers are like, no, you won't.
Yeah.
No. We will fight for the people.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
So you're great. You're so smart. Okay, so fun facts. What's your favorite thing to do when you're not doing politics and saving Canada and the world?
That was far too much credit. But my favorite thing to do is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. I don't know if you find this. I'm sure you do, at least to some extent. When I'm here in Ottawa, it's like work boot camp. Like, you just hit the ground running and you just work. And then eventually...
It's a great way to not miss your family too. To immerse yourself in work too.
Yeah, you work a lot, right?
Yeah, you don't stop.
And the pressure is great. And
pressure builds diamonds. That's my saying. Yeah.
There you go.
Makes
there
diamonds.
You go.
Yeah.
And so, but what I find is, by the time I get back home, I want to invest in my community, and I also want to touch base with friends. I want to touch base with family. I want to invest time. I want to invest time there. And so, honestly, in my discretionary time, I do love the natural beauty of the region I live. There are beautiful mountains and fantastic fields and open skies, and so I enjoy going for hikes and just spending time in the outdoors. But probably my all-time favorite is actually just connecting with people that I love. And so
your husband recently
and
married.
I was just going to say, I am married to a fantastic man, and with him we love being hospitable and having people in our home. And so probably one of our favorite things to do is actually just cook a good meal and have people over.
Yes, I will come over. That sounded like an invitation to me.
Come. It was an invitation.
That's whether it was or not, I took it that way. Food, I'm there. Okay, so favorite food.
Okay, number one, probably Thai food.
Okay.
And then number two would be Indian food.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie. I feel like it changes for me. I
find this hilarious because these questions stump MPs. You can ask them about legislation and policy and like foreign affairs, and they're like, and then you say like, so what's your favorite book? Oh, I don't read. I don't have time to read. I'm reading committee reports. Like,
right.
Yeah, like nobody has time to read.
Totally.
Right?
I would say probably like one of the movies that I really enjoy as of late, late as in like the last 10 years, probably The Intern. I just think it's fun.
I don't know if I've seen it. Who's in it?
You should watch it. It's a good one.
Okay, well, I'll take your recommendation and roll with it.
Yeah.
Music? Do you love music?
I do.
Do you have a favorite band, the genre?
I actually, I love listening to all sorts of music, but probably, I don't know, Need to Breathe.
Okay, I love it. But I find that these questions, as silly as they are, they give you an intel into what somebody's drawn to. Right? I think they're not silly because they're really like, oh, like when my daughter tells me to read a book, I take that very seriously because it had an impact on her. So then I'm like, okay, I got to read what she's talking about, because then I see what matters to her.
Yep.
And it makes you more connected to people. I think that's my 2 cents on that. Rachael Thomas, incredible humanitarian woman. People want to get involved. They're very upset about Bill C-11. The next steps before we wrap up, how do they get involved? What can they do? How can people elevate their voice to say, I do not want this? And what do we do next?
Yeah, so Bill C-11 it went to the Senate and then got sent back to the House because it was amended in the Senate, which is rare. That doesn't happen often, but it did in this case. And so now it's back in the House as of today, up for debate. And so we're kind of in the final push here. And so my encouragement to Canadians who wish to have a voice on this would be write the Liberal members of Parliament. Write as many of them as you possibly can. Write to the NDP, write to the Bloc, and tell them to kill Bill C-11. It really is that simple. It's one line. That's it. Hit send. Make it go off. The other thing, of course, would be, the Conservative Party of Canada also has a petition up, and it certainly would be worth checking that out as well.
I think that's great advice. And when I get pushback when I say that to people, I'll say, message your MP, and they'll say to me, but nobody answers me. Doesn't matter. I still say to people, it's still on record. So that's what I say to people. I'm like, but nobody answered me. Don't worry. It still matters that you sent it, right?
Absolutely.
Use your voice. Be like Rachael. Do good. Have integrity. Accountability. Let freedom reign. Thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It was really fun.
So
and thank you to everybody who's watched. If you missed any of our other episodes, you can watch them online, anywhere that streams podcasts, YouTube, obviously here on Facebook, we stream them live. I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all for engaging. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for watching this edition of People Before Politics.